The last former Minneapolis police officer convicted for his role in the murder of George Floyd sentenced to more than 4 years in prison. Tao denies doing anything wrong. He testified that he merely served as a, quote, human traffic cone.
I can't breathe. Those were George Floyd's last words. Words that were captured on video and words that reverberated across the globe. Words that George Floyd repeated over and over again, more than 24 times.
Tao was sentenced in state court to serve 4 years and 9 months for aiding and abetting second-degree manslaughter.
And this will be the final sentence handed down in connection to the murder.
Tao was is the last of the 4 officers to be convicted on those state charges. In fact, in a rare bench trial, the judge found the 37-year-old guilty of aiding and abetting manslaughter. Tao, who has always maintained his innocence, says he was focused on the crowd, not what was happening behind him. Prosecutors argue, though, that he saw what the other officers were doing to George Floyd and that he should have intervened. Tao already serving 3.5-year sentence for those federal charges. That was for depriving George Floyd of his civil rights.
George Floyd described what was happening to him. He called out for his mother. He said, "They're going to kill me." He told the officers, "I'm through." He told them to tell my kids I love them. George Floyd narrated his own death.
Officer Chang, you'd agree that the timestamp on your body-worn camera when the fire truck arrives is 1:32 and 50 seconds Z, correct?
Yes.
Defendant Tao's actions on May 25th of 2020 directly facilitated George Floyd's death. In fact, the continued restraint was the defendant's idea in the first place. A self-described human traffic cone, he also prevented others from rendering aid. He held back concerned bystanders who wanted to check Floyd's pulse, including an off-duty firefighter who could have performed CPR.
Officer Chang, you'd agree that now the fire truck appears to be leaving, correct?
Yes.
Timestamp on your video is 1:35:06Z, correct?
Yes.
The defendant knew about the risks of prone restraint from his more than 1,000 hours of training and from his 8 years of experience as an officer. He was trained to render aid, trained to perform CPR. He had been trained to use the side recovery position to avoid positional asphyxia. But nevertheless, he encouraged the continued prone restraint and watched and stood by for over 9 minutes while George Floyd begged for his life, became unresponsive, lost consciousness, stopped breathing, and his heart stopped beating.
It seems to me that you're walking around quite a bit. Can you explain why?
It's pacing back first to make sure that, I was concerned for the officer's safety because of the crowd. So I just want to make sure that the officers were okay.
Did you observe other people at other locations besides where Mr. Floyd and the officers were?
You can say at least one at every corner of the intersection.
Did you observe people standing in the Speedway parking lot?
Yes.
And there were 1 or 2 people on the corner where you guys were?
Yes.
And at least one person across the street to the west, right?
Yes.
Southwest corner.
So as to count 2, having been found guilty by the court of aiding and abetting manslaughter in the second degree, after a trial pursuant to Minnesota Rule of Criminal Procedure 26.01 Subdivision 3, judgment of the court is that you are convicted of that offense. Count 1 is dismissed pursuant to the negotiation. You are sentenced to 57 months in prison with credit for 340 days already served. Upon release from your federal sentence, you will be transferred to the Minnesota Department of Corrections to serve the remainder of your state sentence unless alternative arrangements are made with the United States Bureau of Prisons. Your provided DNA sample is required by law, and you are prohibited from possessing firearms and ammunition for the remainder of your life. Pay a $50 fine, $75 surcharge, and $3 law library fee from prison wages. Any questions?
Oh, no. God bless you, sir.
All right.